Chancellor. Mrs. Katja Plate, head of KAS Office Romania. She works for 18 years for Konrad Adenauer Foundation. She was part of the North America and Europe team, lead the regional political dialogue program in the South Caucasus, and the EU project Democracy Starts With You. And now she's running the office in Bucharest. And Mr. Liviu HOROVITZ, researcher at German Institute for International and Security Affairs, Romania. He studies issues related to nuclear coercions and in general is interested in the confluence of transatlantic economic and security relations and also on qualitative research methods in social sciences. Welcome and thank you for being with us. So let's start our debate with our first speech. Michael, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to discuss. And it doesn't happen so often that a German term like Zeitenwende is even mentioned in the English program as in the German way. So perhaps this describes on the one side that the Chancellor Olaf Scholz chose the right term when he held a speech on February 27th last year. And on the other side, that it really describes what's going on in Germany, but I think not only Germany. We heard Zeitenwende already in one of the introduction speeches this morning, and that this is really a fundamental shift and compared to the situation before Russia attacked Ukraine. So I'm quite sure some of you, when they hear Zeitenwende and how Germany acts and perhaps changing things, you can imagine that some of you think, oh, for Germany it was a quite long wake-up call we had. I look back to 2014 when Russia already started in the end the war against Ukraine and invaded Crimea and in the Donbas region. And all of you know that just some months later Germany started the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project. So a second example is, perhaps when it comes to China, that when we look back as Germans, but perhaps in this case as Europeans, I myself ask me the question very often, how could it happen that China, for example, has so much influence on critical infrastructure like harbors, and a lot of harbors in Europe? And I know Germany was one of the countries who was not against this trend. Perhaps we haven't seen it. So this is the question: how long haven't we seen things, or how long perhaps haven't we wanted to see things? And when you compare to this time, I mean, after the war in 2022 started, Germany is since beginning of this year independent from Russian oil, gas and coal. Just within 9 months, we were able to make this. We built several LNG terminals within a handful of months. When we look again to the China example and critical infrastructure, these days Germany is checking where, for example, Huawei technology is implemented in critical telecommunication infrastructure in Germany, not only in the telecommunication infrastructure itself, but also, for example, where are components of this Chinese company used in windmills and other things. So there are a lot of things changing in Germany, and especially when it comes to the question of military. I mean, this 100 billion euro extra money the government decided already last year. Just last week, when President Zelensky was in Berlin, the German government adopted another military package with a value of 2.7 billion euro. We sent Patriots to Poland, to Slovakia. We built up our invest and activities in the Baltic region. We had air policing and airworks here in Romania. So there are a lot of things that were not possible in Germany before February 2022. And I think this is the main thing, that not only we were discussing what could we change, the real Zeitenwende is that it's probably the first time that really Germany changed a lot of things, and that this process is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we found out where we have some weaknesses, we found out where we can do better, and we are working on this. And perhaps the overall message within this is that we as Germans want to make quite clear that we are ready to take more responsibility within the EU, within Europe, but also in NATO. And and perhaps there is one symbol that shows how deep this Zeitenwende goes. It's for the first time that Germany is working on a national security strategy. I have the privilege working on this with other colleagues. And this was not a direct answer to Russia's aggression war. It was already implemented in the coalition agreement in December 2021. And this is really important because it shows that this moment when the war started in February 2022 was a moment when we in Germany found out that we have to rethink security in a different way. And I can tell you, working on this project, we have a delay of some weeks because we have so intense debates in the government. What does the national security mean? It will be an umbrella strategy. So the first time that we as Germans have such a kind of strategy in a lot of dimensions. Hard defense, of course, and that the discussion about the 2% goal for NATO, that will be mentioned there, but also the general commitment that we see our role. The second dimension is the question of resilience, not only economy, also the question of disinformation, cyber and all this. And the third is the question what the US colleagues called in their national security strategy shared challenges. So when it comes to climate change and other things that are for us hard security topics and not only questions of ecology or whatever. So we want to bring this together in an integrated approach, and this is the real revolution we see these days in Germany, that we don't see security just in different silos, that we rethink where the threats are, and that we as Germans know that if we as Europeans and within the European pillar of NATO want to be successful, we have to go into lead in a cooperative way. Are we there where we want to be? No, but we are working on this. But perhaps this is also a part of Zeitenwende, that we don't promise things that we did in the past. Several times I had in meetings with allies and neighbors before we started writing the document, I got the comment, oh, in the past you described the problems perfect and you described the solution as well on the paper. So what's different this time? And I would say this time it's different that we don't just mention it on the paper, that we really act, and especially this security strategy, when we will publish it, hopefully within the next 3-4 weeks, we see this as a starting point for debate on security and the security culture in Germany, and not as an endpoint. And finally, I think when it comes to European dimension, especially here in Romania, I mean, the government, but also the whole country, did so much in the past over the last months. Your support for Moldova, but all the other facts about this solidarity lines, that German company now has also a maintenance hub here in the region for support of Ukraine. The question when we had a problem some weeks ago about the grain, and Romania was the one country who said from the beginning we have to find a European solution for this. So I think this is really an enormous thing, and that's perhaps also one reason why Minister Baerbock was here in the past twice. That President Steinmeier will come next week. The Chancellor was here. And perhaps let end me with, and that makes me really optimistic, that we see this all as a European challenge, because it's a European challenge. It was mentioned this morning. The fight and the battleground is in Ukraine, and the brave people of Ukraine fight this war for us. But this attack is against all that what we stand for as European Union, about for our liberal democracies. And let me end with one personal thing, and perhaps this describes quite well how deep this wake-up call was. I tell this story every time because I think for me shows that we had a kind of systemic problem perhaps in thinking sometimes. I bought a house 12 years ago in the south of Berlin. And this house, when I visited it for the first time, I asked, what kind of heating do you have in this house? It was just rebuilt new, so it was just 1 year old. And the owner said, it's a geothermal heating. And I said, wow, that's really, I mean, originally I'm a green politician, so I was impressed, and I said, that's so eco-friendly. I said, why do you do this? Because in those days it was so expensive to build such a system. And this man, who was a trader for wood, said in 2010, that was the reason why I took the decision, he said, well, my fear was that Putin could just stop gas delivering one day, and then I'm independent. And that's the question, which is one of my leading questions all the time. How can we prevent, as Germans or as Europeans, that an ordinary citizen knows that we have a problem, but the political elite, the business elite, took so many years more to come to this conclusion? I think that's the crucial question, and I would say at the moment, Germany learns a lot of lessons, and we act, and I'm quite sure you will have some questions on our German debate within a lot of Germans sitting here. So I'm finishing here, and thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for explaining the concept better. If you want the applause, sure, please do. Katja, the floor is yours for your speech, please.
Thank you, Cristina. Yes, we have indeed a lot of Germans here, and Germans are infamous for forever fighting about terminology. So here I go. I don't like the term Zeitenwende, and I'm going to tell you why. Actually, I do not think that the 24th of February 2022 was a Zeitenwende in the sense of the times ended on the 23rd and started new on the 24th, or were radically different. For me, it was more a reality shock to Germans. So, and this is maybe also the reason why the term of Zeitenwende is so prominent in Germany, but not much picked up and taken over by other Europeans. So this reality shock, which Germans in fact had, where does that come from? Why? Why was it? So I am coming from the field of political education and political consulting, so I have a different approach, and it is my job to try to bring debates into a wider societal arena or platform. And actually at Adenauer Foundation, I'm pretty sure that a lot of other organizations in Germany also active in our field had the same experience. It was before 2022 and the Russian invasion into Ukraine. It was, we had severely underdeveloped security culture in Germany, I would say. That means that there was not a big or huge interest for debates on security and defense issues. I would say much underdeveloped in comparison with other European countries and societies. And I remember very well that as a consequence of the Russian invasion into Crimea in 2014 at Adenauer Foundation, we created a whole new department for security and defense. And we were actually criticized by the leadership of the Christian Democratic Union, which is close to us in terms of ideology and thinking. Why we're doing that? They said, like, we don't need that. We are surrounded by friends. We would like you to create a department on sustainability and climate change. Said, yeah, we will do that too, and we will care, but let us have our department for security and defense. And so that tells you something about the climate and also the level of security culture we had. So we have in the public arena a lack of basic knowledge about defense. We have a lack of basic knowledge about military strategy, military terminology, army ranks. You can go through a lot of points there. And up to now, we do not have a really good understanding in the German public about what hybrid warfare means. So it's very difficult also to explain inside of Germany that currently hybrid threats are going on in Germany, how they look and what's going on. I would say Germans currently today are very much under-concerned about what is actually going on in this area in Germany, in my opinion. So we all have an inkling where this underdeveloped security culture comes from. So it's, I mean, it's not totally surprising. But we also, to be fair, we have to remember that Germany, I mean, it was actually forbidden by law to employ troops outside of Germany. It was in 2001 that the first combat mission, German's combat mission, started in Afghanistan. And I do remember very well that actually we had in the German public arena a big difficulty at that time to speak about what's going on in Afghanistan. So I remember very well in the beginning it was a taboo when German soldiers died in Afghanistan to say that they fell. So this person fell for Germany. There was a big debate in the media and said it's not appropriate to use this word because of the Second World War and the terminology. It was last year that the Minister of Defense inaugurated a memorial for the fallen in Afghanistan, so a place of remembrance. And so there is a huge delay in Germany in the public arena to approach these issues, to find words for them and to express them. And this, of course, reflects back on how we perceived, how we treated, how we debated what was happening in Ukraine as well. We had in 2020 a debate because the German Ministry of Defense wanted to purchase combat drones. And it was blocked by the German parliament, and the argument was that it is inhumane to buy combat drones because someone is sitting with a joystick killing people. This is just an example of debate, of the level of debate from security culture we had in 2020. In January 2022, I remember very well, mere weeks before the Russian invasion Ukraine started, we had a public opinion poll in Germany saying that 80% of Germans were against supplying defensive weapons to Ukraine. Only in Germany we have a distinction between defensive and offensive weapons, by the way. So I'll just let this remark. Of course, this changed. And this is why I can come to terms with the term of Zeitenwende, because I would also say there is a fundamental change in German thinking. So we are debating today radically different about what is going on in Ukraine. We have moved a mile in Germany, also in the public arena, but of course in the government, in the political arena as well, when we talk about these topics. But we are not yet where others in Europe are. And so this, especially for people like me who are in the field of political education, civic education, this is something we still need to work on a lot. I can understand everyone who is frustrated about Germany in this regard, especially in Eastern Europe, because yes, you told us so, and that's true. And I witnessed that myself. And I'm also, I share some of your frustrations because I was for Adenauer Foundation in Georgia from 2007 to 2011. I reported in detail what was going on about the Russian strategy, the strategy employed, which was then reiterated in Ukraine again and again, and it was not perceived. So I share in this frustration. But there is no need to remain in frustration because Michael Scharfschwert very rightly pointed out all the things that have already changed, and that gives I think that's a very good sign. And actually, I'm also relieved to see that there is a lot of movement, not only in the political arena, but also in the arena of the public debate in Germany. So we need more exchange and discussion. It is very important that we bring politicians from Germany, for example, to Romania, to Eastern Europe, expose them to this discussion. And the other way around, please come to Berlin. Talk with as many people you can. Share your knowledge. And even if you said, I tried it before and the Germans didn't listen, yes, indeed, we do have a Zeitenwende. There is a new window. Open this window, try again. I think the outcome might be different now. We try to provide more information to Germans about what's going on, more analysis. We will hear more about that from the scientific point of view. And I also think that there is now a window of opportunity and that informations will be received differently in future. Yeah, that's my hope. I think it's very important to have people meet, exchange positions in the academic sphere, but also always think about the public arena and transfer information to a wider audience. So therefore I'm also very happy about that we have a bigger interest in the media, and that media is actually doing a good job on informing the German public. And I would also invite you to cooperate intensively with the German media, be there as a contact person, give interviews, provide them with information. All this can help to bring Germany more into the discussion and the debate that's going on here in the south of Eastern Europe. Especially the communication bridge between Germany and Romania might be very helpful, because Romanians have a very unique understanding also about Germans, German culture, and how to talk to Germans. So please make use of this knowledge and help us out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katja, for reminding us how important communication is in the sense of word as well, and also for supporting the media. Before I turn to Liviu, I want to announce the audience to prepare the questions, because after Liviu's speech, we'll open the floor for questions. Liviu, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. And I'm twice glad to be here, because I was born and raised in Timișoara in Western Romania, and even if I left 20 years ago, it's really a pleasure to be back. Now, given that I'm a researcher and I mainly work on nuclear policy and on strategic questions, I thought you probably want to hear different things and not just the same thing said differently. So I thought I'd take a step back and try to give you my perspective of how this Zeitenwende integrates into a broader picture. And I'm going to make three arguments, more or less controversial. I hope more, so that you can ask questions or we can have a discussion. So the first claim is that the European security order is just fine. And it's strange to say that in the middle of a war, but basically I think it worked as it was supposed to be. And that gives the framework. I'm not just saying that for nothing. I think it gives the framework within which the Zeitenwende and the process that takes place in Germany is actually taking place. What do I mean? If you read a number of publications on the Zeitenwende, a lot of their authors, they want to tell you, this is a blank slate. We used to have a peace order. Now we have a war order. Now everything's going to change. Really, will it? So the question is, 30 years ago, the United States decided to remain in Europe. The Cold War ended. The Soviet threat was gone. The ideological threat of communism was also gone, and the United States still decided to stay engaged. It wanted stability, because if you read the documents, as I unfortunately spent months in the archives of the Bush administration, they didn't really trust us Europeans to not go to war with each other. So they said, okay, if we want the global order, we have to stay there. And they wanted some influence over the Europeans back then to push forward globalizations. Okay, things change in 30 years. So, be that as it may, 30 years further, the United States remained the guarantor of European security. Now, the order was there even if we didn't talk about it much, especially in Western Europe for around 15 years, because we thought, you know, war is archaic, as my co-panelist explained really well. A lot of people thought this was never going to come back. But it didn't mean that it didn't exist. It was for the entire time in the background. And as we see now, the order works. The United States is the one country that pushes NATO. It's the one that reinforces NATO. It is the country that provides most support for Ukraine, and it is the country that organizes European defense. So, in other words, the system works as it was supposed to work, at least to some degree. And that creates a framework. It doesn't create a blank slate. It creates the framework under which the developments are taking place. Which brings me to the second point, is that if you again read about Zeitenwende, the detractors say, well, it's a nothing burger, you know, the Germans talk nicely and nothing happens. And then some other people write texts that tell you that, you know, the world, you know, things will change dramatically. And if you're a political entrepreneur, that totally makes sense to push things forward, because finding consensus is really difficult and getting allies is hard, so you want to say that, you know, great things are possible. But I'm an analyst, so I have to tell you that this is within strong benchmarks. What are the, you know, I think I'm giving you 3 examples. One is that I really think that a lot happens in this economic dimension towards Russia. However, while this is happening, we're still not out of the woods what the implications will be. We'll see how that works over the next years. On the military domain, yes, a lot is really happening. In Germany, there is a lot of discussion, not just on spending, but also on reforming the system. We will see in how far bureaucratic opposition, political opposition, and just merely implementing reform is going to work out. I'm not going to tell Romanians how difficult it is to implement reforms. And the third, and I think the most important, and that's from a personal perspective, I think ideas changed a lot, especially among young politicians who, I'm quite sure when they entered politics never thought that they would have to deal with the issues of war in their lives, so they completely ignored it. And then when this thing forced them to think about them, they, at least from my perspective, came to it in a very pragmatic fashion and said, okay, these are problems, how do we solve them? And at least in my personal interactions with a lot of parliamentarians, especially the young people who came with little baggage, had much more pragmatic views. And I hope this ideas, this change will affect decisions that will be taken in a few years. So I think this is one of the most important parts of the actual Zeitenwende. That brings me to my third and last point. Now you might think, okay, so we have this order that works, and then the Germans will do a little bit here and there, hopefully more, let's see. And then everything's fine. And I think, yes, to some degree, but the problems are outside. The problems are the challenges, the biggest challenges, that if we look at this system on a long term, yes, how the war ends and what we do in Europe and so on is one factor. But there are 2 external factors that are particularly important, and that especially if we've seen from the banks of the Black Sea, security in the East is all that matters. I think those developments will worry a lot of people, especially in Western Europe, and that is US economics and Chinese security, or Asian security. On the economics front, you know, look, back in the day, the United States was invested politically in Europe. They thought American democracy can thrive if the democratic European system thrives. If we look today, you know, populism pushes democracy on both sides of the pond. Then we had economics, that was one of the foundation of the relationship. If we listen to the Biden administration, if you read the latest speech by Jake Sullivan, who happens to be the national security advisor but talks a lot about economics, well, you know, the decisions that the Biden administration takes might be good for the American worker, they might be good for the environment, but I'm really afraid how this will affect the pillar that supports transatlantic relations. So I think that's one of the aspects that I look forward with. I don't know what's going to happen. And the third, the final aspect that I want to talk about is Asia, because, you know, if you listen to people, it's about choices. You know, it's either Europe or Asia. I don't think that's the case. But if the security situation in Asia worsens, and it kind of looks like it might, though the discussions between Sullivan and Wang Yi last week were a bit better, but it might long-term worsen. And then the question will be, from an American perspective, what the Europeans can do to contain China. They will ask a lot, and the question is whether we're willing and able to deliver, because it's going to be expensive. So that's going to strain again, I think, this transatlantic system that we build, and the fact how Europeans then think about what the Zeitenwende can be and should be into the future. With that, I hope I gave some food for thought, so I'll close at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I said, the floor is open for questions. Do we have any question from the audience? Okay, over here, please. Please introduce yourself. It's coming, it's coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your excellent points. I'm retired Major General Paul Hormuz.
Closer, please.
Closer?
Yeah.
Okay. Senior expert in New Strategy Center. I just wanted to learn from Germany experience with conscription. From the NATO countries, Germany was for a long time one of the countries which still had a conscription, I think until 2011, if I'm not wrong. Was it useful? Was it not? I know that after reunification of Germany, there were some, let's say, different treatment of people coming from East Germany, from those coming from West Germany. And I think also after reunification, a lot of people were moving to West Berlin not to be conscripted, the young people from high school and universities. So is it, for the whole conversation and with the situation which we have now, I mean, we've seen some NATO countries encouraging this. We've seen some other countries which have a model for reserve forces, territorial forces, like UK, like US, National Guard, things like that. Can that help in German case or, let's say, other NATO countries' case to improve the security culture, to better understand what is at stake? Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, so when you ask German militaries, they are quite clear on this for the moment. They say this would probably not help because the reform we need inside the Bundeswehr, this will really a tough race. You already mentioned it. This is really a hard job, and I think the Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, made a great job in his first month, and that's really makes all of us very optimistic. But it's not just bringing in more people. I mean, you have to train them and so on and so on. But, and when we look to Finland, for example, where they have this concept of total defense, I mean, we are really far away from that. But the topic that you mentioned, I mean, what is really something we want to change, and what you already mentioned with the security culture. I give you an example from the question of disaster management. So far in Germany, because disaster management will also be one dimension in this national security strategy. So far, when it comes to disaster management, in most cases, the citizens are seen as a target group and not as an actor or part of the solution. And that's a little bit the real challenge we have to go through. How can we make clear that more or less everybody in this German society can play a role and has to play a role when it comes to security? In that way, we're really working on how can we get this mind shift. This will not be easy. Communication is one aspect, but it's going much deeper, I think. So for Germany, and that's really voices from the military, we have this debate from time to time. It will probably not help. But if we are not able to make clear to the people that really the security thing is something that everybody can play a role, and it starts with your mobile phone and WhatsApp and virus and cyber. I mean, when you go to companies, all these trainings, a lot of people, when they do cybersecurity training at their job, they leave this thinking at the job. They don't take it with them. How can we do this? This is the thing we're working on. And I don't know if perhaps in the future we will get this debate for the Bundeswehr again. How can we increase the number of people who serve and so on? But for the moment, unfortunately, there are some basic problems we still have to solve.
Katja, please, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I would love to. So I totally agree. So all the military experts also tell me that reintroducing conscription today in Germany will not solve the problems we are facing now. But there are some things which I actually really always liked about the system of conscription while we still had it. And the main point is what we call, and this is now for the German speakers in the room, den Staatsbürger in Uniform. So it is the normal citizen in uniform. So when you have a system of conscription, basically from every generation, from the males, you have the totally normal average German in the military, with his ideas and perceptions and problems and objections, whatever. And this does something to an army to have these conscripts there. And the army with conscripts is different than a professional army. Not saying one is better than the other, it's just, you know, that brings something in. And I always very much like this concept because not only did it make the army diverse, it also brought people inside the army who wouldn't have applied as a professional, but they came in via conscription and then found out, oh, army is different than I thought, maybe stayed. So this is something I always liked. And on the other hand, conscription is binding the army back to the population. You have sons, cousins, your parent is in the reserve, and so you have a more fluent exchange between army and society. So these are things which I always liked about conscription. So we had good reasons in Germany to stop conscription, because when we stopped, it was only a tiny part of each year, of each class, let's say, of young Germans who was drawn. And fairness was an issue, let's also say it like that. And true is also that we were surrounded by neighbors, so a huge ground force, territorial defense, was not seen necessary at the time, so I can very much understand it why we ended conscription in 2011. But I think it was a mistake not to discuss about what do we do in order to find a kind of replacement for these positive aspects of conscription which I mentioned. And I think because we didn't think about it and find remedies, we now have this lack in a security culture. That's maybe one of the reasons as well, because this kind of fluid exchange between army and the broad society stopped at that point. So this was an aspect I would love to mention.
Liviu?
Just very briefly, because I agree, but I have no expertise, so I'll tell you a story. That's what people do. So the story is, I work at an institute that has around 100 researchers, and we have a security division. It has 2 people from the military always allocated to us. And in the past, you know, I've heard stories about people saying, well, you know, if I come to work in my uniform, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes the other people uncomfortable. We shouldn't do this, and so on and so forth. And in the last round now, they have a monthly, I think, meeting that's called Kekse and Kameraden, cookies and comrades, or whatever the English word is. And it's overflowing. There are so many people who want to attend this strange meeting. You know, 2 years ago, it would have been the strangest meeting, where these military folks tell or explain how their work works, or what different tasks that they do, how they execute them, and so on. And yeah, it's full. It's full of researchers who are keen to understand, who to learn, and you know, there's people who used to do migration. Like, it's not, you know, it's not the security division. Sure, we're there, but it's not for us. So things change. It might take a while to implement measures that go far beyond that, but they do change.
Okay, we have around 8 minutes. Gentleman over here, please. We have a lot of questions. I see a lot of hands.
Thank you. My name is Eldad Becker. I'm Berlin-based correspondent of the Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom. Iran is taking a very active role in Putin's war against Ukraine and Europe. Does the Zeitenwende include a new German approach towards Iran? And if yes, what is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's collect, okay. It was a question over there as well, Robert. It's a journalist, this is why I know him.
Thank you very much, Cristina. I will keep my question very, very short. Robert Lupitzu, Calea Europeană. Olaf Scholz mentioned in his speeches about Zeitenwende the need to have a reformed European Union and the need of enlargement. It's the reform of the European Union, it's a precondition for enlargement. What's the order? First reform and after that enlargement? Thank you very much.
And one final question, it was over there, the lady. Ladies first, sorry. And I have to remind you, we have to answer in approximately 6 minutes. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dana Alexandra Scherle from Deutsche Welle in Bonn. A question to Ms. Plate. You made a very interesting point that Germans don't really understand hybrid warfare. We heard in the speech by Dorin Recean, the Prime Minister of Moldova, some very strong examples of hybrid warfare in the Republic of Moldova. For example, paying for protests meant to overthrow the government, fueling conflicts between different ethnic groups, and so on. Could you give us some examples in Germany of what you call hybrid warfare by Russia?
Thank you. Maybe we should start with this last question, Katja.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the last recent examples was that we had in February a huge rally in Berlin on the day, around the day of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. So it was a rally that reunited the players from the extreme left and the extreme right, which we have never seen before in Germany. And it mobilized a potential of Germans that either were with the extreme left or the extreme right, both very pro-Russian, both buying a lot of and carrying on and multiplying pro-Russian narratives, not taking into regards facts and data, and that by itself was worrisome. But even more worrisome was when the information from secret services was, let's say, brought to the surface some weeks later that showed a Russian strategy or doctrine to exactly do this. So there is a Russian strategy to reunite the extreme left and the extreme right in Germany to build like a barrage through the middle of society. And if that's not an example, I don't know. And I think I think Germany is under-concerned about this example. It's like, oh, hey, hybrid warfare, that's happening in Moldova, yeah, right, but not in Germany. And I think we need a much closer look on the issue, and maybe the term hybrid warfare doesn't stick with Germans. Maybe we need to find another word. But I mean, we also had people murdered by Russia in Germany, in a public park, yeah. And we have a ruling from the court on it. Yep, and I think we are under-concerned about these issues. So, and I think in Eastern Europe, the patterns of hybrid warfare, the strategy that Russia employs over and over again, which we have seen in Georgia, which we have seen in Crimea, which we have seen in Eastern Ukraine, and we are seeing currently going on a large scale in Moldova, are not really seen and understood by wide public in Germany, and I would very much like that to see it change.
Okay, thank you. Liviu, you are the expert on nuclear issues, so take the question about Iran, please.
Oh, okay. Right.
Surprise. Surprise.
Okay, well, I'll just say a brief thing about hybrid.
Keep in mind we have less than 3 minutes, please.
Okay, on the hybrid question, the one thing I've done most of the time for the past year and a bit was to discuss Russia's nuclear narratives. And nuclear escalation risks are real and you need to be discussed, but Russia obviously uses nuclear discussion, nuclear innuendo in order to scare people. And it was so hard, I can tell you, it's so hard to explain both to the public and to various other circles in Germany that this is what they're doing. They're trying to scare you. No, but this must be real. I'm like, well, to some degree, but this mainly meant to scare you. Oh, that doesn't happen to us. I'm like, well, hold my beer. Obviously it happens to you. So this goes to this perception of this is not about us, this is about other, it happens to other people and we were not aware of it. Talking to people in France about this or in Britain, they're like, well, so how come people don't understand in Germany? I'm like, well, they don't. Well, we explained it to them and it worked in a week. Well, good for you. It doesn't work like that here. So that just on that.
Switch to Iran, please.
I don't know is the question, is the answer. I don't know whether there is a different approach. The Iran question is really complicated and it's going to be a difficult thing to tackle, so I don't know whether there is a change.
Okay, Michael, you take this question as well.
Yeah, Iran was a difficult topic, is a difficult topic, will stay a difficult topic. I mean, we see just Minister Baerbock was just in Saudi Arabia and Qatar this week with a lot of meetings. I know it's always on her agenda. We see what China did in the region now, the negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So it's not just Iran-Russia. It's a more complex problem, and I think so far it's really difficult to see what all these new developments will really mean for the region. But coming back to the question, what does it mean for Israel? And I think there is no change in the German position. It's quite clear that Israel is part of this, I don't know the English expression of Staatsräson. Yeah. So Israel there is no doubt that Germany will stay on Israel's side, that we see Israel's security as part of our security. So there no change, but the question is what's happened in the region and how can we react and implement, and I think it's no secret that especially Minister Baerbock, when it comes to Iran, was one of the most critical foreign ministers and really was not shy to use open words to the Iranian regime. And I think that's the right way to make quite clear that we know where they stand and what they stand for and what we stand for, and that we want also to do our part, that the people in Iran also can live in a free world, in a free country. So there is no doubt on this question, but these developments, I'm quite sure, will be on our agenda over the next months, very intense. Two sentences, one, reform and enlargement.
Okay.
I think
Quickly.
First it's most important, how can be the European Union keep that united and strong position as we have. So it's in the end probably a mix. It's not just, enlargement, and on the other side there is reform. We need reforms. Even if we don't enlarge, we have to reform the European Union. We did a lot of reforms within the last 1.5 years. When you look to the point that Europe gave money for weapon delivery and so on. I mean, there's so many reforms in an unofficial way that happen. We have to go on with this as well. And finally, on the hybrid, I think it's really important how to define hybrid warfare. 2 examples. I mean, Nord Stream, the explosion, that was also a kind of hybrid warfare. And the second is, at the beginning of the war, we had a problem with, I think, almost 1,000 windmills in Germany that were not able to be monitored online after a hybrid attack on a satellite, probably from Russia, the attack on this satellite that had this damage problem that is also influenced this German network among windmills. So we have these examples in Germany as well. And of course, I would agree, in the German society, it's not that topic, but when I look to German companies and how they perceive this danger, there is a 180-degree mind shift over the last month. They really take totally different care on this than 2 or 3 years ago.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you as well for the questions and for being with us. A short break, and the next panel is less than 10 minutes. Russian political warfare and threats from high north to the Black Sea. Thank you so much. Thank you. I really like your introduction. It's I didn't. It's